Welcome back to the Bucs Planet podcast after that debacle that occurred on national television. I mean, there's so many things that we're going to get into in this episode. This is going to be a very interesting episode because I know what the problem is with the Bucs. I know what it is, and I know the quickest way to win a Super Bowl again. I know the quickest way to do it. I have the answer. It's right here in my notes, and we're going to talk about that after we talk about this playoff game. Because I don't know what you guys were expecting, because some of you guys were actually expecting a competitive game. I simply was not. I posted it on my story. I posted it on my Instagram. I kept telling people every time they asked me, I said, this game's not going to be competitive. What did the Buccaneers do all season that made you say, hey, this is going to be a competitive football game? Hey, it's the playoffs. Anything can happen. I understand that. But at the same time, these teams, if they play, 10 times, 9 times out of 10, it will be a landslide win for the Cowboys. Do you know why? Because this team is not very good. You were below 500. You won the NFC South because of one singular player named C.J. Henderson, who is the worst defensive back maybe in the history of the National Football League, and allowed Mike Evans to absolutely have a day, and then we won that game, we won the division. Okay, that's the reason you're there. Because of random, completely clutch play by Tom Brady in the fourth quarter of games that we should have lost. The Saints game at home, the Rams game, right? Like games you had no business winning that you were bailed out by the GOAT, right? That's why you won the division. Not because you're good, not because that's the last reason you won the division. And then you show up and you make the playoffs. Okay. I mean, even Brady always posts the playoff hype videos the day of the playoff game. He always posts them. He didn't even post one that day because even he knew we were going to lose. Because this team is bad. It is not good. It is uncompetitive. It is the worst coach team in the league. And we're going to start off with the first mistake the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made by, for some odd reason, deciding to bench Jamel Dean for Sean Murphy bunting in the most critical game of literally the entire season, the playoffs, January football playoffs, and Jamel Dean, who by every PFF grade, by almost every stat, was considered a top 5 corner in this league this year. That's just what it says. That's what it says. That's not what I said. Watch film. Watch what the stats say. Okay? That's the way it was this year. And Sean Murphy Bunting, who's been nothing other than one of the biggest busts that we've seen in the defensive backfield since Vernon Hargreaves, probably the biggest since him. Oh, actually, no, there's another guy. We're going to get into him in a second, too, actually. And, they said Jamel Dean had an illness, and that the illness, and he was writing, and then this is the part I don't understand. So, Sean Murphy Bunting in the pointless Falcons game, okay, that was the week before, okay, he gets an interception, it's completely pointless, okay, and by the way, he lost that game, you looked uncompetitive in that game, it just shows you how bad the depth is, Jason Light, fire him, whatever. So, you then say, okay, so Jamel Dean has an illness, and Todd Bowles comes out and says, well, I just wanted to play the hot hand, which is why I played Sean Murphy Bunting. The hot hand? He got a meaningless interception in a game in which the third stringers played? For the Falcons, too, by the way. And you're going to ride what does he do in practice? Like, I understand Jamel Dean had a couple weaker games recently before the playoff game, but still. He's going to ride the hot hand. Okay. So, the hot hand apparently is the guy who's been absolutely trash all year, pretty consistently so. Absolute trash all year. That's the hot hand. Oh, we got to ride the hot hand. Not the guy who's statistically top 5 at his position in the league currently. That's not the hot hand. That's the cold hand. That's very, very cold. What are you doing? Okay, this is why that might have cost you the game. Because the other issue is you have a bunch of other ding-dongs out there. One who, and by the way, none of them are coming back. Sean Murphy Bunting, gone. See you later. Mike Edwards, what was that? What was that performance? I'm convinced, and I've been saying this all year on Snapchat. I might have said it on here. I don't remember. I'm convinced that these guys do not practice. I think that what they do is they go during the week and just look at their roster and say, oh, well, this is a good roster. I think we're all set here. I don't think they practice. What gives you an indication that this team practices? Even Coach Ball, even Todd Bowles comes out and after we get burned like 80 times, there's guys wide open running around the field. He says, "Oh well, it's not my fault. These guys, this is day one stuff. They're messing up day one stuff in the playoffs. Okay, it's January. Day one stuff. That day one stuff comes back in July in your first week of training camp. We're in January, and you're messing up day one stuff because." You don't practice. Well, I don't understand. I mean, they were messing up day one stuff, and then it's funny. This is classic Todd Bowles. Classic Todd Bowles. He doesn't accept responsibility, and he blames it on the players. That's what he did. Well, do you know whose fault it should be if they're messing up day one stuff? Maybe it's your fault for not teaching them the day one stuff, for allowing this nonsense to go on, for allowing this culture of idiocy to go on. And we have Mike Edwards, who looks like he literally hasn't played a snap in the NFL, comes out there and messes up multiple coverages, including a touchdown. The first one to Schultz, I think was the one he messed up. And, there was a rumor that Kellen Moore, the Cowboys offensive coordinator, stole hand signals from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when we were on offense, when they were on offense and we were on defense. Because I found it very interesting that all of a sudden after the first, they went, 3 and out, I think once or twice, and to start the game, and then they went right down the field every single drive. They never punted again. And I find that very interesting because they were lined up and they were calling plays that were very precise and perfect for every defense we ran. It was one of the biggest master classes that I have ever seen by a head coach. You got outclassed. You got outclassed by Mike McCarthy and Kellen Moore. Your defense is pathetic. And I don't get... So many Bucs fans keep saying, well, the defense is good, it's the offense fault, Okay, yeah, obviously the offense is worse than the defense, but the defense is also bad. The defense is bad. It is a bad defense. I know statistically in points, it's like, oh, well, they're like kind of up there and, points allowed, kind of up there and what. The defense is not good. Every single time they play a well-coached offense, just a competent offense, they get exposed every week in and week out. All right, let's look at the offenses they've played this year that are competent, okay? Kansas City ran off the field, right? Obviously, the Cowboys ran off the field, okay? My mind's kind of going blank right now, but there's plenty of other examples too, because what this defense does is, you get to play a bunch of awful offenses all year. You get to play the Saints offense. You get to play... you get ran off the field by the Panthers the first time, by the way. The third string quarterback, you get ran off the field by the Steelers. They're bad. There's no other argument. They're just bad. They're a bad football team. Okay, they play competent offense, ran off the field outside of the Seahawks game. Okay, it's just what it is. Every single time, ran right off the field. Right, they kind of played decent in the Bengals game, but then, one team made second half adjustments, the other team did not. The other team was us. Classic. The defense is poorly coached. It is. How are they still blowing coverages? So this has been a theme with the Bucs way before Todd Bowles. This has been a theme since the Schiano days, to an extent. We have to have the dumbest players in the NFL. We have to have the dumbest players. Why do they still mess it up? We've gone through multiple coaches at this point, and so many different players too. And it just always seems that we're in like December, we're in January, we're in whatever. And after there's always guys wide open, and then they're always like, and then they're like doing this on the sideline to each other. It's January, by the way. This isn't August. It's not September. It's January. But do we have the dumbest players in the NFL? Because why does it only happen to us? It seems like it only happens to us. We're the only team that in December still looks lost on every single play on defense. That's a big pass play. Even our own head coach said you're messing up day one stuff. Are we dumb? Are we poorly coached? Or is it a combination of the two? I think you know the answer to that one. Because a lot of these idiots aren't going to be here next year. Mike Edwards, you're not going to be here next year because you suck at football. Guess what? Logan Ryan, get the hell out. I'm tired of you too. And you're not under contract. See you later. What a waste. Sean Murphy-Bunting, good grief. You should be looking at like the local car dealership for a job at this point, because there's absolutely, I mean, at least with other people, they might have a chance of going somewhere. I mean, I don't know, call up Honda or something in South Tampa. Maybe they have a job opening. You're done. All right? Hicks was okay. You're done too. And we're actually going to get into the list of Buccaneer free agents, and we're going to go into the cap space. And I'm going to strategically say my opinions on what they should do, because they're obviously $55 million over the cap space. That won't be this video. I'm kind of touching on it now, but we'll make a whole separate video on that one later. I mean, just off the top of my head, Fournette, you're gone too. Fournette, you're gone. You know, we signed him. It'll only be a little bit of dead cap money on the 3-year deal we signed last year with them. It's time to go. And here's where it gets interesting. Donovan Smith. That'll be a video for a different day, but he committed his, sacrificial hold that he just has to commit every single game. Who, by the way, looks like an absolute embarrassment of a football player himself, getting absolutely owned by Micah Parsons. Who else is a free agent? Jamel Dean is. And you know what? If we have a competent head coach that understands how to start players, that's an easy re-sign. He would re-sign right now. Because the people that the Bucs do need to re-sign is Winfield is going to want an extension. He hasn't played great recently, but you have to give it to him. You have to keep the core young players. Re-sign Winfield. Re-sign Jamel Dean, right? And then we'll get into Devin White later. But now that you just showed that you want to bench, so how should I explain this? So essentially, Jamel Dean is a very important free agent this year for our football team, okay? He is an unrestricted free agent, okay? So we want to re-sign him, and he's going to have a lot of teams that are going to have draw interest. And in the biggest game of the year, we benched him and presumably pissed him off. And now there's no there's no articles or anything that says this, but it is no guarantee that he resigns with us. I mean, he just got benched by his head coach, and now he might not re-sign with us because of this issue. So he got benched for literally no reason. Oh, he had an illness. Okay, well, why was he active then? Why was he active? Okay, because you said it wasn't really the illness. It was mostly because you're riding the hot hand, whatever that means, because, it was clearly the cold hand. And now he might not re-sign. He might have just blew the opportunity to re-sign Jamel Dean, who's a good young corner for us. So good job there. Good coaching there. So you ought to re-sign Winfield. You should re-sign Jamel Dean. We'll see if he can put up with your stupid antics. Hicks, see you later, right? We drafted Logan Hall in the first pick of the second round for a reason, even though he literally didn't develop whatsoever, and in fact negatively contributed to the team by in his second day ever at training camp, tearing Jensen's knee up, pretty much every ligament. I don't feel like going through them, but it's like pretty much all of them. So thank you, Logan Hall, for doing nothing except injuring our own players in training camp because you're an idiot. Who else off the top of my head? I wish they could get rid of Gage so bad, but they just can't. The contract is too stupid, but they can get rid of him after next year. That's off the top of my head, all the big ones. But, look. Julio Jones, obviously you're going to get rid of him. All pretty much like the one-year duct tape players to this awful roster that Jason Light assembled. And that's just what look, the defense just looked bad. You think about that one play. The good example of out-coaching, if you guys ever just thought of it, there was a play when Dallas, they got a big first down, maybe 15 yards or something, and then they run a no-huddle, play-action bootleg, they throw it 1 yard to the tight end. There is not a Tampa Bay Buccaneer in the screen, and it goes for 30 yards. Because we're run by idiots, okay? You were out-coached, you were outclassed on national TV, and let's get to the offense. That's just the defense. The defense looked freaking pathetic. Now let's go to the offense. Once again, here we go, right? We're going to do the whole Byron Leftwich, game planning of the most predictable offense in the entire NFL. And you don't know how I know this? There was a literal stat that came out. And the stat was the percentage of times that an opposing defense had the perfect play for that offense. So the amount of times that the defense lined up and the perfect defensive coverage pre-snap, before everything, for whatever play the offense was running. Every other team and they did this for the whole playoffs, the whole wild card weekend of the playoffs. And the average was like, okay, you had the Bengals-Ravens game, or right around 20%. Basically, most of the games are right around like anywhere from 20 to 30%. And then there was an interesting jump. There was a very interesting jump. You guys tell me this is statistically significant. So you had, Bengals game 26, you had this game 20, 25, 24.2. And then, the Cowboys defense against the Buccaneers offense. 60%! 60! How is that even possible? Do you know how it is? Because I know how it is. Because they already know the plays, because it's so fundamentally stupid and archaic and telegraphic that they can't even come up with anything creative to fool a defense, and they already know what's going down. 60% of the time, the Cowboys had the perfect coverage for whatever play we ran, because they already knew what plays we were going to run, because we have an awful offensive scheme. It's called running on first, screen on second, and then some stupid incomplete pass on third down. Does the offense practice? How many times did Brady just throw it in the middle of the field and there's not even a receiver within 3 miles? I mean, seriously. Because I've about had it. And, it's just the same thing over and over again. I mean, 60%. I want you to go to bed tonight and think of the number 60%, and that when the Buccaneers ran a play on on Monday night, that game, that more often than not, in fact, a lot more often than not, the Cowboys already knew what you were going to run, because you have the stupidest offensive coordinator of all time. And he was finally fired. And here's the one thing I'll say. I've been saying that he should have been fired all year, and it looks like Bowles kind of agreed. Because here's one thing that I will agree with Todd Bowles with, okay? Todd Bowles did not get a chance to pick his own coaching staff. He did not. He was promoted in late March, mid-March, about mid-March. All the other guys were taken. Usually the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, those are all happening in January when coaches get fired, January, early February. When Bowles got the team, he was stuck with his coaching staff because all the other coaches were already taken. They already signed with teams, already did everything. So they essentially could not, he couldn't pick his own staff. He was stuck with, what Arians gave him. And Bowles apparently, from what I'm reading, I don't know if it's true or not, but I kind of believe it's to be true. He wanted to fire Byron Leftwich in the middle of the season after the Ravens game. But he couldn't, because who else was he going to get to fill in the shoes? And that's when I read that report, this was a couple days before all of our offensive coaches got fired. I knew they were all going to get fired. Because when you don't, Todd Bowles essentially looked at the situation and said, I can't fire Leftwich because I have no one else to replace him with on this coaching staff. Do you know what that means? That means he literally has zero faith in the rest of this offensive coaching staff and calling plays. Zero. None. Nada. Or he would have done it. So when the report came out saying, he wanted to fire him but didn't have anyone on this coaching staff to replace him, yeah, they're all going. They're all getting fired. I mean, you can't keep them after that's out there. I mean, are you kidding me? And look, I'll give Todd Bowles at least credit. And he's not a good coach. He's not a good head coach. But I'll say this. I will give him credit for at least recognizing this fact. He is very self-aware of the issue that was going on. And he fired a couple defensive coaches too, and a couple special teams coaches, but not Keith Armstrong. I don't know how that guy keeps surviving, but he did. But one of the special teams coaches got fired. And, a couple of the defensive line coaches got fired. And, he gets it, right? I mean, clearly what was happening was that there was a bad internal culture. And I have been saying this for a long time about how this coaching staff has decimated this culture, right? I mean, you now saw that clip of Tom Brady coming out. He's trying to motivate people. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares, right? Nobody's motivated. Nobody cares. This is losing Tampa Bay football. We're right back to pre-2020. We're right back to it. That quickly. That quickly. Just how it is. Just how it is. And Bowles recognized this and fired he fired everyone except obviously himself and a couple of the defensive coaches. Everyone else is, and then obviously somehow the special teams coach, the head special teams coach. So that doesn't that works. And I'll give him credit for doing it because it needed to be done. But here's the problem. I know the issue with the Bucs. Okay, now kind of pivoting off of the playoff game. Folks, it's time. It's time to nuke it. It's over. Honeymoon's over. This team is not competitive anymore. It wasn't all season. You would have won only about 3 to 4 games if Tom Brady wasn't your quarterback in clutch situations. And by the way, the Chicago Bears received the number 1 overall pick, and they won 3 games. I believe the Buccaneers without Tom Brady would have won 3 to 4, so they would have literally been in contention to receive the number 1 overall pick. And by the way, if they just lost that game to the Panthers, which they almost did in that, second week before the season ended, they would have had a top 10 pick in the draft. So think about that for a second. This roster is bad. It is a poorly constructed roster by Jason Light. I know it won a Super Bowl. And it worked. And I'll give them all the credit for that. It worked at one time. But it's the same problem the Rams had. The Rams created a roster. It's just poorly constructed. You can do the whole free agency thing to bail you out of not being able to draft. And it kind of works. And you keep doing the salary cap manipulation methods. But eventually you have to pay it back. And the players, get old fast. Not like the drafted players. Drafted players are young. They're faster. They have a longer shelf life. But you overpay for these big free agents. You don't draft well for a few years. And this is the spot you're in. And that's what's happened. Jason Light drafted in 2020. Joe Tryon is a bust. He is a bust. Maybe he'll be able to turn it around, but as of right now, he is an awful, awful, awful football player. Zion McCollum, what is that guy doing? What an idiot. He's absolutely lost. Logan Hall looks like a bust so far. I know it's his rookie year, but didn't play really any defensive snaps all year. Injured one of our players, key players, Ryan Jensen. And, Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask is clearly a bust too, so far. They don't even put him at backup. And in fact, they're not even really entertaining the idea that he's going to be starting next year. That should be a no-brainer for a second-round draft pick at quarterback. Are you kidding me? He's had 2 years now. If he doesn't play this year, he's officially one of the worst draft picks that we've had in a long time. And you essentially have had non-contributors on every side of the ball since then. But you got Rachaad White. Okay, cool-ish. He's pretty good. It's not like a game changer, I would say. Cade Otton started off hot, became not that good towards the end of the season, but that's okay, young guy, whatever. Jalen Darden, what an absolute debacle that was. You already cut him. Jake Camarda is obviously a good pick, but that's a punter. It's really... You haven't drafted well. They haven't drafted well in a while. And it just catches up to you. And unfortunately, look at all the good teams right now that have young nucleuses. There's a winning formula in the NFL nowadays, okay? And we don't have it anymore, folks. We don't have it. Our roster's aging. They're, quite frankly, not as good as they think they are. It was an issue last year, a little bit, and it was an issue this year. They aren't as good as they think they are. Chris Godwin regressed. Mike Evans regressed. Now, I understand Chris Godwin, the ACL thing, but still, he was never a speed guy anyways. Russell Gage, not a good signing. I understand he was injured, but still, the offensive line's deteriorated, right? Leonard Fournette declined. Tom Brady declined. Carlton Davis, maybe mild decline, but not terrible. Vita Vea declined a little bit. Joe Tryon just stayed bad. He didn't do anything. Then Shaq Barrett declined, then got hurt. Akeem Hicks, okay. Jamel Dean improved, so congrats. The only one to do it. Antoine Woodfield, pretty good, declined a little bit towards the end. Mike Edwards declined. Look, there's just the players are old, guys. Like it's time to nuke the roster. We got to reset the whole thing. Build in the draft. It's how it's done. You might can, do this whole like free agency patch, duct tape work deal. But it only, you're only giving yourself like a 2-year shot. And if you don't win it, then you're really screwed. Look at the Rams. They're paying their dues, and we're going to be paying our dues next year. The teams that are consistently good every single year in, year out are built in the draft because they have a good core, young players that aren't getting paid super highly, right? Look at the Eagles, okay? I understand like they have A.J. Brown required, free agency signings. Free agency signings need to top what's already there, not be the entire thing. You look at the Bengals, nice core, right? They got Burrow, athletic quarterback, young. Jamar Chase, young. They've got, Mixon. They've got young defensive players. They got T. Higgins. They've got, young, right? Mahomes is young. Allen's young, right? All these teams have young players, okay? It just passed us up. Mike Evans is great. Mike Evans is great deep ball. Great, deep ball person. Mike Evans is old, folks. And Mike Evans is still good. Don't get me wrong. Chris Godwin's still good. Don't get me wrong. But there's no speed anymore. There's just the jump ball. It's the efficient route running. It's the smart play, which is actually wasn't really a thing this year. But, normally it should be. Normally it is. And that's fine. But all these other guys, you look at all the top receivers. They're all fast. We don't have any guys that are fast. Scotty Miller gone, by the way. We can get to that later. He's not coming back. I mean, it's just time, guys. I mean, that we need a young, fast, athletic quarterback. It's what the league is now. It's what the league is. No options. That's what it is. I kept saying, I'm not saying you need a Lamar Jackson, but you have to be able to move a little bit, especially with this offensive line. And Brady, look, I don't think Brady played awful this year. He declined a little bit, and I think most of that was because of the fact that he felt like he had to carry the roster to an extent. And, the problem is that he doesn't want to get hit, and so he throws the ball quickly. He doesn't stand in the pocket to take a hit like some of the young guys do and stuff. And I understand he's old, but plays don't develop fast enough for that anymore. A lot of the offensive struggles went on him because of this. We need a fast, athletic quarterback. It's just time. We've been putting it off for a while now, but it's over. I mean, all the guys move now. I'm not saying again. You don't need a Lamar Jackson. Even Joe Burrow moves a good bit. Aaron Rodgers does a little bit too. I know he's old, but still. Mahomes moves good. Allen's obviously a really good runner, right? Jalen Hurts, really good runner. Brock Purdy can move. I don't care what you say. Brock Purdy can move. He can. And we don't have a guy that can move. And unfortunately, we just got to move on. And Kyle Trask is going to be able to move really either. He can move a little bit better than Brady. But I'm so sick of watching all these other games all season. And all these guys move. And it's the way it is now. It's the way it is. It's winning football now. And another way to think about this that I thought about it when I was really trying to think, I was like, oh, do we really need to reboot this roster? Because in my opinion, this is what the Bucs should do. They should start Kyle Trask next year. They just should. Or sign Sam Darnold. Like, realistically, that's probably the only guy you can afford to get. Sign Sam Darnold or start Kyle Trask. I would personally start Kyle Trask the whole season. You're only going to win about 2 to 3 games, maximum 4. You're going to be in play for the number 1 overall pick. You're definitely going to get a top 3 pick. The whole coaching staff will be fired. I don't care who they bring in for offensive coordinator. They're all going to get fired, barring who they get at quarterback. Because the issue is if you go out and get a Derek Carr, if you go out and get a Lamar Jackson or whatever that you could potentially get, or an Aaron Rodgers, you're just delaying the inevitable. The roster is not good enough anymore. They are too old. They're declining. We're paying them too much. Reboot, cut half the team, draft young. It's just what we need to do. You need to rebuild. Okay, we had a fun, 3 years. It really wasn't fun last year, so we really just had a fun 2 years that we made like an impromptu roster that became good for like randomly. And that's just what it is now. That's just what it is now. And there's no point in delaying the inevitable. Even if Brady comes back, they're not going to be competitive. They're not going to be competitive. I don't care what you say. Maybe if you get a new offensive coordinator, I can be persuaded, but the core is it's just not the new age NFL. It's too old. Okay, they need younger players, faster players with speed. Even look at the Jaguars. The Jaguars don't have great receivers, but they're all fast, and they looked competitive against the Chiefs and almost beat them to go to AFC Championship game. Literally should have, if they don't fumble and drop a wide open touchdown. And they don't even have good receivers, but they're fast. They're young. They're competitive. That's what it takes. A core nucleus. Travis Etienne, Jaguars, fast. Lawrence can move, right? Big arm. Kirk, fast. Zay Jones, fast. They look competitive against the Chiefs. We did not. Offense is sluggish. It's archaic. Maybe with a new offensive coordinator it'll look better, but the speed, man, we need the speed. It's time to nuke the roster. And I know it's not just the offense, too. I mean, the defense. The pass rush sucks. They need to draft better pass rushers. The secondary's not that good either. Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, fine, pretty good. Anton Winfield's good. They need another safety. They need a nickel corner. And quite frankly, they might need a linebacker. And they definitely need a better defensive line. Because outside of Vita Vea right now, it's not so good. And the receiving issues, the offensive line needs some work. I mean, they need a guard. Sort of. They're going to need to replace Donovan Smith either this year or next year. It's just what they need, a better tight end. I mean, it's time. It's time. Pay your dues, okay? Start Trask. I want Caleb Williams. That's who I want, and he's going to be the number 1 pick next year. And I think that even if you don't get the number 1 overall draft pick next year, if you just get like a top 5 pick, you at least then have decent capital to trade up to the number 1 overall pick and get him without having to give up like a king's ransom. Like if the Bucs this year try to move up from like 19 to 1 or whatever, like to 3, that would be like multiple first-round picks. You give up multiple second-round picks, probably a player or two. Versus like if you have a top 5 pick, you're probably, give up maybe a couple seconds, but that's fine, So that's what they need to do. Caleb Williams, he's fast. He's the new thing, right? He's rocket arm, speed, elusive. It's what the NFL is. It's just time. The roster's not that good. It's time to rebuild. I know it's sad, but when I really realized this is when I saw this poll, and it was like talking about Bucs players. It's like, all right, so who's the Bucs MVP? Who's the Bucs Offensive Player of the Year? Who's the Bucs Defensive Player of the Year? Who's the Bucs Offensive Rookie of the Year? Who's the Bucs Defensive Rookie of the Year? And that question is very, very difficult. Do you know why? Because I just realized, no one on the roster sticks out as that good anymore. And that's when I realized it's over. Because let's think about it right now. Think about it right now. Who's the MVP? My opinion, Tristan Wirfs. Or obviously you have to give it to Tom Brady because he led the comeback, single-handedly carried this team through multiple games. But even he didn't play that great this year. The only person that actually had a good year at his position is Tristan Wirfs. That's the only player, and Jamel Dean. So Offensive Player of the Year, so MVP, Brady. Okay, let's just, even though that's kind of like a default option, I guess. It's like we didn't really stand out. He just carried us through multiple games that we should have lost. But that obviously wasn't enough. So I guess Brady, Offensive Player of the Year, Tristan Wirfs, right? Your right tackle. Is that only actually a good player on the team besides Jamel Dean, to be honest. Then Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, this is tough. It's tough. You're going to give it to Jamel Dean, but Jamel Dean got benched in the last game, which obviously wasn't his fault. It was Todd Bowles' fault, but it's just like, okay, I guess. And then this is where it gets interesting. Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's like, okay, I mean, you'd obviously give it to Rachaad White, but and he was good, but it's not like he's like a fantastic, speed demon. That's another thing. The running backs. Fournette, slow. Rachaad White, good receiving back. He's good. Physical, slow. We need speed. You have three receivers, Godwin, Mike Evans, and Gage, and they all have the exact same skill sets. They're good at contested catches. They're good, slightly good at route running. And they're not all speed team. They don't really have a speed element to their game. I understand that, like, relatively, they are fast. Yeah, well, you're saying they're slow. They're in the NFL. Okay, shut up. They're obviously fast compared to us, but in NFL standards, they're not that fast. They all have the same skill set. It's such a one-dimensional scheme. Can't have it anymore. You need to be dynamic. We're not. We don't have dynamic receivers. We have three receivers that do the same thing. And to be honest, we're slightly having that issue at running back. Fournette is okay at catching. Rachaad White's really good at catching. He's faster than Fournette. He's more fit. Like, I get all that. But they're both two physical running backs that are slow. I'm sorry. That's just what they are. Especially Fournette. Fournette's actually slow. Rachaad White's like sneakily fast, but he's never going to bust one out for 50 yards. Never going to happen. And do you know when this really becomes an issue? When you realize that the Bucs were the only team in the NFL, or one of the only teams in the NFL, that didn't have a touchdown that was over 20 yards before the Panthers game in week 16. Or 17, actually. Week 17 was our first touchdown over 20 yards. So let that sink in. Speed matters? Yeah, I think it does. That's just what you got. And then, I mean, so you think about offensive rookie of the year. Give it to Rachaad White, but that doesn't seem like a slam dunk. It's just like, okay, I guess. Like, cool. He was like pretty good, but not like, he didn't like carry the team or anything. Like, cool, I guess. Then defensive rookie of the year, I don't give the award. Who was it? Logan Hall, thanks for injuring our player and then not getting any playing time all season. Or Zion McCollum. It's certainly not going to him. It's certainly not going to that guy. And then most improved player, right? This is the other one too. And it's like, who? Every player regressed. Every single player regressed. Every single one of them. Except one player, that was Jamel Dean, which is why it has to go to Jamel Dean, but he already won Defensive Player of the Year, so he's going to get 2 awards. So the Bucs really only had 2 good players this year, and that's it. The roster's old. It's time to rebuild. It's sad. It's tough. We're going to be bad next year. We're probably going to be bad in 24 too. But we might be competitive again in like maybe 2025. That might be our year. You just cannot keep lying to yourself, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, the front office. You cannot keep lying to yourself that this roster just needs to quote-unquote reload and just add a couple pieces. You can't. You can't afford to. Stop kicking it down the curb. Pay the dues now. It's over. Tough news, but it's over. All right? I don't know when I'm going to make my next video. Might be a while. Obviously it's the off season. I don't make as many videos, but it's over. It sucks. It's over. I'll see you guys next time.